should be getting bopping. Arachnids don't have bones. Imposter. Damn it. Well, you see, what happens is that when you're in drow form, you have to manifest bones, otherwise your body will start flopping about. Anyway, we're almost to 9:05. Let's give us a couple more seconds, but honestly, I think we're ready to start. I think whoever was going to come here for the start is already here. So, let's get bopping. Amogus? Yeah, agreed. Let's see if this works. All right, so,
Hi.
Hello. Let's see if it... Well, right now, my face is a little frozen. Okay. So, just to introduce, let's introduce our situation and then us. First of all, to introduce the situation, I live with this person. And fun fact, I'm pretty sure if we were both streaming from different rooms at the same time, the streams would be able to hear each other because the walls are so thin.
That's happened in the past before, where you tell a funny joke and I'm in chat just watching from the other room and I start cracking up because it's something referencing one of our D&D games.
And then the stream hears it.
Me cackling from the other room.
So we have both in our room sharing one microphone, and I am on a little tiny laptop with minimal processing power, trying to run 2 instances of VTube Studio as well as OBS, as well as streaming. So as you can see, Lear's model right here, our lovely little green friend, is having a grand time, and mine sometimes decides to dissociate. But it's fine. It's fine. This is scuff. This is what VTubing's all about, right? I'd say so.
Do you have an extra spot to charge a phone?
Extra spot to charge a phone.
I lost our music. My phone's dying.
Okay, do we need a mouse?
Probably not.
Okay, we have a trackpad. Plug it in there.
Cool.
Get it in there. One moment.
Technical difficulties as per the usual.
Spider mommy dissociating. Yeah, just about. Sometimes I just gaze off into the distance. Look at the stream.
What happened to it? Oh no. Rip.
This is gonna be a very educational night. 1 second. The beeps model is...
I crashed.
It's fine. Just wiggle your head a little bit. There we
go.
There we go. Now you're back. You believe in us? Thank you, Zion. Well, sleep. You know what? I feel that. So, let's put we got the phone back up. We got the music back up. Sorry for the early scuff. We're trying... maybe we move a little bit. We move once in a while. I think that should be enough, right? Also, I just realized your window's a little bit small, so let's make you a little bit larger. There we go.
Why am I tall?
Because you're tall. You're tall. You're taller than me. You're taller than me.
That's not a low bar. That is a low bar.
Excuse me? Are you calling me short?
I am calling you short, but that doesn't mean I'm tall either.
By the way, thank you so much, Not Yoing. Thank you so much for stopping by. We're just getting started. All right. Yeah, I'm out here trying to explode my computer. It is actively exploding. I'm surprised it's still lasting.
It's only overheating a little bit.
Let's see. By the way, can y'all hear the music? If y'all want to hear the music and you don't, let me know. Here to support the homies. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Low? Okay. Let's turn it up a bit. There we go.
Is that better?
I think that should be better. And I think we should be getting just about started. So, first of all, let me introduce myself. I am Leetloth. I'm a Demon Spider avatar VTuber, and I'm here with my wonderful roomie Lear today to kind of discuss how to get people, started in D&D. So what are my qualifications specifically? I've been playing for a couple of years. I've played a significant amount of every class. I've played every class. I've also DM'd a couple of games.
Quite a few.
And also, but what I feel like makes me especially qualified is the fact that I run a D&D club, and one that is of considerable size. And a lot of people actually already come to me for advice on these types of topics. So, as a result, I have gotten to learn a lot from other people's experiences, and that way be able to hand it off to you guys. Now, Lear here is actually one of the first people I myself taught to play D&D Sword. Now, you had a little bit more experience beforehand, but...
I had a little bit of experience. It was a very janky experience because my friends and I decided we wanted to play D&D, but none of us had any experience in high school. And so we kind of skimmed the rule book and then threw it out the window and came up with our own mechanics because we thought that was more fun. And so I didn't learn proper D&D until I started playing in Leet's game. Because before that, it was just us, like, goofing off and causing mayhem. Although there are a bunch of fun stories from those games, like one Call of Cthulhu session in which I tamed a bear on accident, and another game in which I got stabbed PvP literally 4 minutes into starting the game. So lots of fun stuff. But yeah, most of my experience is playing in Leet's games as well as other games that our party has... Other members of our party have DM'd.
When it comes to most of our personal games, most of them happen within our friend group, which is really nice. But at the same time, a lot of the people who are in that friend group started off as just people we've kind of invited into the game, and then we've adopted them afterwards of like, hi, you are now one of us. There's nothing you can do about it.
I do joke that the only way I make friends is by, finding an extrovert to adopt me, and that's exactly how this happened.
That's exactly how this happened. Yeah, honestly, a lot of people's first games are, like...
Oh, hi, one of them's in the chat. I just recognized your name.
Yeah, Grimish is here. Grimish is one of the guys who helped teach me to play D&D. We have the whole family in town tonight. Isn't that neat? I'm really liking it. But, so, here's the thing that I know is that not a lot of people, at least it seems like not the majority of people, really get the chance to learn to play D&D in person. A lot of people are turning to learning to play and joining games online, which has both a lot of advantages and disadvantages. For example, as an advantage, there's a lot more people. Mm-hmm. There's a lot more people and a lot more games that are looking for players. But at the same time, when you're meeting up with people in person, it's a lot easier to stay accountable and, actually show up and actually get a game going instead of just saying, let's start a game, 10 times until it never happens. So that is a little bit of a difference between, English. That's a little bit of a difference between our experiences and what a lot of people's experiences here are going to be. But at the same time, it's still good to talk about. So, honestly, you were talking, Lear, you were talking about how you kind of started in this kind of pseudo D&D thing, but what was the point where you decided, how did you actually get started in that game? Did someone just invite you and you showed up?
So I had a pretty close-knit group of friends in high school, and one of them was really into D&D, and she wanted to learn how to play. And so she, as a first-time DM, also her very first time playing, which is, a feat, just decided, I'm just going to start DMing off the bat. And so she read all the rules, and she took it upon herself to teach us, even though she hadn't really had any experience with other people. She'd listened to some podcasts, I think. Maybe she hadn't started listening to Critical Role at that point, but maybe Dimension 20. In any case, she took it upon herself to teach us. But first DM isn't going to know everything about everything, and so we were kind of making it up as we go, alongside playing through by the book. We also tried out a couple different systems. Of course, we did pretty standard D&D modules out of the player's handbook or DM handbook. But we also did a couple of Call of Cthulhu one-shots. And we all took turns, kind of DMing for each other. And so that's how we started, was just teaching ourselves out of the manuals. But then once I joined a more experienced group, I came to college, joined the D&D club, which is how I met Leet, and the Leet started the first like real long-term campaign that I was in called Better Be Buoyant. And in that campaign, I played a star druid named Tawny, who I love dearly and miss every day. And that was the first time I actually had to learn mechanics, because I wasn't really paying attention to mechanics before, and I'd only played one-shots. And so, that was a fun learning curve. I think I did okay with it for a while. I kept forgetting I had the ability to wild shape. But I had a lot of fun with, like, the floaty lights, and... Was that a canned package? It was a Forgotten Gods campaign.
Yeah, so basically I had gotten a campaign off of a Patreon, and what happened was within 2 sessions of me running that game, I was trying to read it, and I was like, I can't run this, and it just went way far off the rails, because that was also my very first time DMing.
It was all improv, but it was a really fun time, and we had a plot arc. Like, despite what you said, we did have a plot arc.
You see, my friend, you are you're basically an experienced novelist, and you can turn anything into a plot. So,
I do not control the rate at which my brain constructs a conspiracy board. It happens subconsciously.
Yeah, so honestly...
Oh, yeah, I probably should introduce myself.
Yeah, go ahead, introduce yourself. Tell us your qualifications.
My qualifications. I'm a nerd.
That's a pretty good qualification, if you ask me.
Yeah, so, I'm Lear, kind of the goddess of prose, which is an allusion to... I'm a writer. I also go by the pen name Etta Grace, or E.G. Libre, and... I write young adult fantasy and portal fantasy and middle grade but anything in the fantasy science fiction genre. And so I started D&D like kind of in tangent with that. And so I am, as a player, am more focused on like the lore and the story and the backstories of the characters and their narrative arcs and stuff like that, as opposed to the mechanics. I mean, Lear can vouch for me in our current game, Remnant. I'm constantly, like, fumbling with the character sheet, but I'm like, I have a way to make this angsty. So, it's really fun, dynamic, like, bouncing off of some of the other more mechanics-focused players at our table, because I think between the 3 of us, it keeps it really well-rounded.
So, and then it kind of bounces off towards my first time playing, which where essentially a friend I had at the time was like, hey, what kind of character would you like to play? Let's come up with a character. And at the moment, I was obsessed with mushrooms. I just decided to make the existence of fungi like my entire personality. So it's like, and then he was like, and you're short, so you should play a little mushroom gnome. And he makes me a character sheet, and he gives it to me, and he tells me to show up at a place, and he's like, here you go. Play Dungeons and Dragons. And I'm here like, what? And I spend the entire session traumatizing people and pretending to be a rock.
Was that the character that you brought into the space game?
Yeah.
Portia Bella.
Yes, Portia Bella. Because I didn't know how to play the game, I didn't understand any of my spells, so I just pick random spells on the spot and cast them, and somebody else would tell me what they did. And it was very chaotic, but here's the thing. I feel like that was a really great, I feel like that was a really great introduction to the game, because the best way to start is to just kind of get over the rules and just start. It sounds really weird, but when I think about it, I'd say my very first, my journey with D&D and tabletop role-playing actually started with some RPs I did online back when I was a bit younger. And a lot of that, there was basically only one rule. If there was a contest, you rolled a d20, and whoever got the higher number basically won the contest.
Yeah, and that's basically how I started playing. It was all contested rolls of d20s, and whoever got the higher number won.
It was, like, super simple, but at the same time, I feel like,
DCs, skill checks, saving throws, what's that?
Oh, what's that? So, the first thing that somebody really needs to get comfortable with is the concept of role-playing.
Just putting yourself out there and acting silly.
That's what makes the difference between playing a tabletop role-playing game and playing a board game. Because otherwise, without the role-playing part, D&D is basically just a war game, and a war game is just a board game with more rules and is more expensive.
Yeah.
Which, nothing against it. I definitely want to try getting into wargaming at some point. It looks really cool, and you see how I build. You see how I build characters. I'm a menace. But
I think you'd be really good at that. For all of my planning and strategy when it comes to, like, outlining books and things, I'm horrible at, like, actual strategy games like chess and Risk and Monopoly. Like, my siblings decimate me every time. I'm like, I'm gonna go in a corner and play solitaire.
I can't do chess for shit, but for some strange reason, when it comes to, like, strategy and D&D and, like, combat strategy, I'm just like, okay, I've got my system down. I've got my strats. I've got my book. You know, all that. And yeah, first of all, thank you so much. I have some really wonderful friends here joining me in the chat tonight for the extra support. There are a lot of the people who I play with in person. That includes Grumish, and I'm only going to mention Grumish because he's the one who's using one of the nicknames, and I don't want to dox anyone else. But yeah, it was a really great opportunity for me to meet a lot of people and learn a lot more about improv, and it built a lot of my personal confidence as well, I feel like. So anyway, moving on from that, what would you say, Lear, what were some of, let's say, the challenges of, like, when you first started playing D&D? Like, what were some of those moments where you're just like, maybe I shouldn't do this again?
Joke answer, scheduling. Scheduling was always a problem. I started playing D&D in high school, and I was the kind of, like, try-hard kid who was taking 10 AP classes and, like, did 10 clubs and worked on the side, and so just finding time to sleep, much less play D&D, is a challenge. And now I'm an engineering student, so it's like, that and then some.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I feel that.
But honestly, yeah, finding the time. Okay, real answer. Yeah, finding the time to play and just making it a priority and being like, yeah, this is a reason to hang out with friends. Like, we do D&D because we love the game and we love the system and we love, like, the action of rolling shiny clicky-clacky math rocks. But at the end of the day, it's an excuse for me to hang out with my friends. And so prioritizing that and prioritizing the self-care, like, I know I will go crazy if I don't do creative things and tell stories, and specifically tell stories with other friends who have that kind of creative itch. Like, just doing engineering and calculus all day will drive me crazy. And so learning how to prioritize that was a bit of a learning curve, because I am somewhat of a workaholic. And once I got into D&Ding, but yeah, once I got into playing, it came pretty naturally, because I'd been playing, like, roleplay games with my siblings all growing up. Not any kind of system, just, you know, kids in the backyard with sticks. Yeah. And like, writing and stories has always come really naturally to me, but just finding a group of people to do that with, finding other friends who are creative like that, and then making it a priority to keep up those relationships and keep up the game, is really what it comes down to in the end. If you love doing it, then you'll make the time.
Yeah, exactly. As you said before, scheduling is the bane of everyone's existence.
Yeah, I don't think that comes as a surprise to anyone. Yeah. Like, it is a legitimate problem to deal with, and unless you have a good system in place to deal with it, then...
There's two things for me starting out that were kind of those moments where it's like, can I do this? So first of all, I was blessed with having the kind of group that would meet every Friday no matter what, because the guy who was running it invited like 12 people to the game, so it was almost like a rotating circle of like who would come. So essentially it's like, if you could show up that Friday, you show up. And honestly, I feel like if I were to run an online game, that's probably how I would run it. I'd just be like, okay, I'm setting aside this time to run a game. I'm inviting everyone I know. Show up if you want to. That's probably how I'd run an online game to, like, get over the scheduling things, but also that's just a me thing. The other thing that kind of got to me was I'm just a really nervous person. You know that. And what would happen sometime at first, I would just think, oh no, I'm not playing this right. I'm not a good enough player. Why am I here? That would be a lot of my anxiety, when in reality what was going on was people are just happy to be there and hang out. No one's judging you on, like, your quality. As long as you're actively not ruining other people's fun, which you probably aren't, unless other people should probably tell you if you are. But you're probably not. It's probably mostly in your head, and honestly, most of the people who are showing up tonight probably have some form of nervousness when it comes to social interactions, because otherwise they wouldn't have gotten into watching streamers. What? Am I wrong? Am I wrong though?
Not really.
And so no one's really alone in that. The other thing that I've heard a lot is sometimes when people are first getting started in a game, there was a lot of other people who have just gotten started in the game and they're not quite grasping the ropes about what are good boundaries or kind of how to keep a game moving along in a way that's fun for everybody. So what happens a lot of times by accident is the person will just not have a great experience and think to themselves, okay, I'm just never doing this again. And, that's perfectly valid, but at the same time, if you're that kind of person, and you're still kind of interested in the game, but you're just nervous that you're just not the kind of person for it, I'd say find a completely different group and just try again. There's two ways you could go about it. First of all, is finding people online, or second of all, if you have a local adventurers league, just stopping by there and kind of learning some of the ropes and getting more comfortable with your RP, and maybe then trying to get some of your friends together again. That is something that could work really, really well.
There's also, if you're afraid to roleplay, in character, something that I did a lot, especially in my first games, was I would narrate in third person what my character was doing. Also, because I usually write in third person, but maybe that's just me. But, say, oh, Tawny is going to do this, and this is what she's feeling and thinking as she does it. And then gradually you're like, oh, okay, you can roleplay that now. And I slowly got the hang of it. It was when I was given the space to try and, maybe try a couple of times until I landed on the delivery that I wanted. Because, there's a joke that writers are shy theater kids. And that's very true. The crippling stage fright is something that's kept me from getting involved in the theater and stuff in the past. And just being able to narrate in third person is not a bad thing either. It's fine to just do that until you get the hang of, role playing in first person. And if you're uncomfortable with that.
And, honestly, to that point, I can kind of relate to that.
If it's keeping you engaged in the game, it's not wrong.
Exactly. There's really no wrong way to play as long as you're not making other people uncomfortable. I kind of relate to that in a way because I never felt that with D&D, but I actually felt that with VTubing. While I was getting myself set up, when I was first getting my avatar and kind of setting up my stuff, I would refer to myself in the third person. I'd just be like, oh yeah, Leedy likes this instead of I like this. I had a lot of separation between myself and the character. And then gradually, as you kind of get familiar with that personality, it comes together. So some way to get started in role-playing, as you said, is to kind of start off in that third person until you feel comfortable feeling like, wait, this is me. I'm here right now, and this is my story. I'm here on stream. I am the terrifying Spider Queen, here to show everyone what I'm about, or in-game, hey.
Terrifying Spider Queen giving soft, encouraging pep talks with,
look!
dulcimer tavern music in the background.
Look!
So intimidating.
Look, you know what's intimidating? The fact I'm so gentle. What is she hiding? That's really my thought. Oh, you want to know intimidation? You want to know intimidation? I have a Nerf gun. I have a Nerf gun.
Yeah, you're not going to get very far with that.
She's reaching across and trying to grab it from me. Hey, that's my bullet. That was my one bullet.
Gone.
Damn it. I can still shoot blanks. Bam. Bam. See, I am intimidating.
Not anymore.
I certainly can be. She's sticking her tongue out at me. I don't know if I should be flattered or offended.
It's a Nerf, guys.
It's a Nerf gun. It's a little green one that I got for $5 at Marshall's.
So we mentioned we're roommates. Part of that involves whacking each other with Nerf guns whenever we're being self-deprecating.
Or just whenever I feel like it. By the way, if you want to make it even more threatening, check out my throne. There's a set of Nerf guns on there. Anyway, back to it. So, I think we covered some points of advice for getting started as a player. Is there anything that you think that we missed when it comes to the advice of getting started?
Grummage pointed out a really good thing where it's like put a piece of yourself in each of your characters and try to fall back on that if the common trait, that common trait. That's also a very good system for creating characters in general. Like, I joke about my own OCs and my stories, but the way to make a good character is just take a sledgehammer to your personality and then give each little piece a name.
That sounded so brutal. I'm so sorry.
That's what the writing process is, though. I mean, I can point to Ed and be like, that's the paranoid older sister part of me, and I can point to Luca and be like, that's the imposter syndrome side of me. I can point to, what are the other characters? Chara, that's the debate kid. I can point to Runaways and be like, that's the other paranoid older sister side of me. And there's lots of paranoid older sisters in my stories. Very mom friend of the group, but, Assel, that's my, anti-establishmentarianism. Disestablishmentarianism. I can't pronounce that. Disestablishmentarianism. But yeah, it's
Disestablishmentarianism.
Yeah, that's a good way of just creating characters in general.
Yeah, and honestly, something I'll confess to is a lot of things what I do is, as a kid, I was the kind of kid who would create lots and lots and lots of OCs. Like, I'd get into a fandom and I make all these original characters and they get their own stories. And a lot of times getting started in D&D, I literally just pull from that pool of old OCs, and I still do.
Yeah, wasn't, I wanted you to say the Vinos were the first ones that weren't like that.
Yeah, no, the Vinos were one of the first, and that was for a game I DM'd, after 3 years after I started playing, and most of my characters beforehand were based off of some sort of, cookie run OC that I used to have, because I used to be in that community.
Well, I think that's interesting is a lot of people get involved in the fandom. They get involved in D&D, and they get involved in original fiction through the fandom space. Mm-hmm. And for me, it was the opposite, where it was I did not have a lot of exposure to the internet growing up, and so I didn't realize fandom was a thing until I was in high school, maybe until after I graduated high school. I just wasn't really online at all, so I didn't realize fandom was a thing. Mm-hmm. And so all of my OCs are OCs from original fiction works, and I find writing fan fiction both very difficult and a huge break for my brain, because you don't have to come up with everything from scratch, but also you have to write them in character, and that requires a really deep knowledge of how that character acts and what makes them tick. And
do you, though? I mean, it's fan fiction. You can
do whatever you want.
You can do whatever you want.
At a certain point, the concept of filing off the serial numbers is if you have to file off the serial numbers and call them they're your own character, then just make an OC. I don't know. It's a big complicated space.
It is complicated.
That's not fanfiction writing is a genuine skill in and of itself, and it's very valid literature. It's just a very different type of literature, and what you learn from fanfiction is very different from what you learn by writing original fiction, which is very different from what you learn by DMing in somebody's game or being a player. And so they're all different elements of the storytelling and fiction space, but they're all, by participating in all of them, you become a better, more rounded storyteller.
And think about this. A really good way to start making characters if you're not used to making original characters for playing a game is to maybe start with a character from a show or a movie or a book that you like, and just kind of readapt them for that setting.
Yeah.
There's nothing telling you that you can't just straight up play your Blorbo in D&D.
I accidentally made one of my D&D characters just a reskinned version of one of my other OCs, so yeah, I've definitely done that before.
Exactly.
I mean, Ali was originally going to be a D&D character in a different campaign, space campaign, and then I made a book out of her backstory, and then I reused her for Remnant, which is the game that I'm currently playing with Elite. So, Yeah, lots of, like, beg, borrow, and stealing from yourself.
Exactly. Stealing from yourself, stealing from other people. Here's the thing. You're here just to have fun. I'd say don't put too many rules on yourself, because there's so many times, especially with myself when I was trying to create a character, I'm like, gosh, I need to make, like, especially when I was starting out, I had to be like, oh, I need to make this one, like, the most original and special character ever. You know, I was putting that pressure on myself to be, like, the best at character creation, when in reality it's just like, no, I don't have to. I just need to play what's fun for me.
Sometimes all you need is a gimmick.
All I need is a gimmick. You know what? I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to be self-indulgent, and I'm going to play the most self-serving bard of all time. And then that character turned out to be one of my most interesting characters ever. And I loved her so much I got a tattoo based on her.
Oh, which one was that?
Mima.
I love the Mima stories. I'm not actually in that campaign, but I love the stories.
Yeah, exactly. Grimace is saying, my first ever character with this group was just Sombra from Overwatch. Yeah, basically just about. What? Don't tell me you don't know what Overwatch is.
I don't know what Overwatch is.
You don't know what Overwatch is? It's a shooter game. It's
Okay.
a shooter game, and there's this really cute hacker chick named Sombra.
Oh, cool.
And so Grimace made a character named Umbra, who was basically Sombra, but placed into D&D. And then when Portia came in, I was just like, I accidentally got him to fall down a 60-foot hole, and then when he didn't try to kill me, he just simply, like, acted like he wanted to kill me. I was just like, please, like, upsies, I want upsies, and then he begrudgingly picks me up, and while we're walking, I'm just like, can you tell me about all of your secrets? And then we became best friends. And I should mention, this was my first session ever. This guy at the table never knew me, and I was here playing this absolutely creepy little child gnome. Like, that was the first time Grimace ever met me, was me accidentally tricking him into falling down a 60-foot hole and then asking him for all of his secrets, and then by the end of it, our characters were best friends, and I started sitting him with lunch the next day.
I don't think I ever heard that story.
You never heard that story?
No.
But yeah, that was, that was also the character that got eaten by a dragon turtle.
I think I joined the friend group a little bit after that.
Yeah, you joined a little bit after. What kind of happened, the way I met you was, so the president of the D&D club at the time said, we need more DMs. You, lady, you step up, you're gonna be a DM. And I'm like, I've never DM'd a game in my life. I've DM'd a one-shot, and it took place in a Macy's, and I made a guy cry from emotion. It was a good cry. One of the NPCs reminded him of his little brother, and he was just feeling really sentimental. But it was like a surrealism game that took place in the Macy's. And they were like, okay, run a campaign. I was like, what? And he was like, okay, we'll make a bargain with you. Out of all the people in our player roster, you get first pick. I was like, okay, I'm gonna pick the funny names.
Yeah, so I guess I have my parents to thank for that, for giving me an interesting sounding name.
You know what your last name means in Russian. I'm not gonna say it here, because that's just putting your name out there.
Yeah.
But your name means something very funny in Russian. That's why I picked you.
I'm not Russian, though. My last name is Italian, which is the funny thing.
Department Stores and Dragons.
Department Stores and Dragons!
I really want to run it again at some point, because I called it the Macy's game. That was the very first one-shot I ever ran. I was trying to do this experimental thing. Like, I really wanted to tell, like, an emotional story. So what I did was I got two guys to make level 2 versions of themselves in D&D. And I was like, after school, after college, you had this friend who tells you, we need to break into Macy's in order to find my wallet. And both of them were like, this is sus. I mean, they were right, because she was actually like the ghost of a girl who was stuck in the Macy's and trying to trap their souls and like continue the cycle.
That does sound like a fun setting.
That was the very first thing I ever ran, and throughout the entire thing I kept forgetting the names of skills.
That's a mood.
That kind of segments into like how we got started in DMing. I know I have a lot more DMing experience than you do, but you've also DM'd. So my experience, I tried to run a traditional fantasy game with like that first game I ran with you guys. But honestly, I feel like my favorite kind of games so far have been the ones that do kind of break the mold a little bit. There are some people out there who are like, if you're not doing the D&D fantasy system, then don't play D&D. But I'm like, but the rules are so good for, like, adapting to different kinds of stuff. Like, I'm used to this. I really like this, so I'm gonna run it because I do what I want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think other systems are fun. Like I said, the only other system I played is Call of Cthulhu once a long time ago, without really knowing how the rules worked. And I tamed a bear, and I was playing with my sister, who was playing an investigator and forgot that investigation was a skill she could do. So...
Hi, Peppy! Go on.
Yeah, it just, I don't really know how other systems work that well, because I haven't played in many other systems, but that would be fun to explore at some point. But the whole idea of D&D is just like kind of the world's your playground.
Mm-hmm. It's built really well as a simulation, which is what I really like about it. It's a simulation that isn't so gritty that
it's not a board.
It's impossible.
It's not a board game. It's a way of emulating real life.
Yeah.
Quote unquote, big glowing air quotes, real life physics.
Yeah.
In a fantastical setting.
It's less so that it's emulating real life physics and it's giving like a consistent system, because a consistent system means that you can build characters that interact in different ways with sort of these quote unquote fantastical laws of physics. At least it's how I implement it. Ooh, Stammer, that's really cool. Stammer says that he's writing his own tabletop game rules. Is it like, it's also so good to see you. Is it like more of a rules-light system or something a bit more crunchy? Oh gosh, we are floating off of the screen.
Uh-oh, sorry.
It's fine, I was doing the same thing.
I noticed there's a slightly weird glitch whenever I take a sip of my tea.
It's fine.
It, like, really wacky changes my proportions because I'm holding something in front of my face.
It's perfectly fine. The only way I could actually get you to work was by turning you on to like one of the lowest settings. Was by turning you on to one of the lowest settings of tracking, so you're gonna be wigging out a little bit. But my computer still isn't toasted, so that's good enough. Well, not sure what shit meant by crunchy. So there's I'd say there's almost two different camps of tabletop role-playing games. First of all, there's stuff like D&D, where all the rules are covered by a big book. And then there's some games where you could literally fit all the rules into like a 12-page pamphlet. And those are called rules-light systems. So, in this sense, Crunch is sort of the more physical rules. The Crunch is the stuff where it's all like, you know, it's all about the numbers. It's the more mouthy stuff. So a rules-light system will do something like, instead of having a whole set of dice, they'll be like, everything is judged with 2d6.
Okay. So, like, the version of D&D I played when I first started, which was, everything is rolled on a D20. If you roll higher, you win. It was like I think we used D100s, actually. It was like on a scale of 0 to 100, how successful are you at doing this thing? And 0 was the best and 100 was the worst. Yeah. And, like, that was just how we played, and we didn't actually follow any of the proper rules of DCs and spell checks and, like, saving throws and this much to hit and AC meets beats, none of that.
So, essentially, in that case, you more or less made your own rules-light system, and it works really well for you guys. Examples of crunchy games, I think, include Pathfinder, Star Wars, RPG, etc. Yeah, a lot of the big names, a lot of those really big names which are known for, like, having whole books, if it has a whole book that isn't, like, a campaign, that isn't, like, instructions for the story, that means it's probably a crunchy system. And rules light include stuff like Honey Heist. Yeah, no, Honey Heist, that entire system is on one piece of paper. Actually, honestly, if there was anybody who really wanted to get into, like, stuff like D&D, but didn't have the time to, like, sit down and play a full game or, like, prepare to play a full game, they could easily pick up a rules-light system like Honey Heist, where it's basically, if you roll above a certain number, you succeed, and you just roll 2d6 for it. Or do you roll 1d6? I need to remember.
I never actually played Honey Heist.
You never actually played Honey Heist? Well, we gotta fix that. Honey Heist is so fun.
I know Brandon Sanderson is coming out with a Stormlight TTRPG, and I am obsessed with Stormlight, and I'm so curious to see how he works the different Radiant orders and the different Radiant, like, not levels, the different codes that they swear. If anybody else doesn't know Stormlight, just ignore me, but I'm super curious to see how they develop that system, because desperately want to play an Elf's Color.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think one interesting way that you can first of all, here's another pain point I feel like people have when they're first starting to get into the game is the magic system, because slots and all that's confusing. That's confusing as all heck. So I feel like a way to introduce people to the game, personally, so I really liked what was done for me, where a friend essentially just created a character sheet for me. I really appreciated that, even if Spore Druid is one of the worst decisions for a first-time player character. Just getting somebody into it and just helping them along and just sitting next to them and being like, hey, you can do this, and not having them like think about their spell slots yet, just kind of holding their hand a little bit and then gradually letting go. First of all, that person, especially if they're your friend, they're going to appreciate the chance to spend time with you and the chance to like get to try out this thing that they've probably been looking at for months or even years.
Yeah, that's how it worked whenever I started, is Thiele sat me down and went like, okay, now here's all the different options, and look through the book and page through and tell me what you want to be, and then we'll help you develop your stats from there.
Yeah. So I feel like I guess for teaching people how to play D&D, wow, we were jumping back and forth between topics. This is fine though. This is fine.
We're staying on topic. We're just jumping around in the order that we
planned. We're jumping around in the order that we planned, because you're like, okay, first section, we're going to talk about being a player. Second section, we're going to talk about being a DM. But if you really think about it, those things aren't completely mutually exclusive, because it's just two different ways of doing the same thing. Mm-hmm. So honestly, I feel like getting started as a player, where was my train of thought? I like the concept. I liked it a lot that somebody was there to just kind of guide me through it and kind of show me the easy points, until I started getting my grips and being like, I want to do this on my own. Like, not gonna lie, my first few character sheets, I sat down with one of my friends, and one of my friends basically made it for me. Until I kind of eventually started getting my own grips on how it worked. It was a really gradual process, but the entire time I was still having a really full time. So I guess some advice about getting into it, the two things. Back to my point. Back to where I was without jumping off into the abyss again. What? One, it's really easy to play a character that's kind of based on yourself in some form. And second of all, don't worry too much about being perfect. Because that's kind of what gets you, that's one of the things that gets you to stop, you know? And also the same thing goes on with DMing. If you're running your first game as a DM, try the types of stories that you like to read or watch. Like, I really like sci-fi. I really like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And even though it wasn't my first campaign, it was the campaign I had the most fun with, because I was like, screw it. I'm going to do what I want, how I like it. I'm going to be self-indulgent. I'm just going to have people just terrible space physics. It's just going to be in space for the sake of being in space, but it's still going to be D&D.
Yeah, I think that having something that's self-indulgent, I mean, you put your passion and your care into it, and people connect to that. Mm-hmm. Regardless of whether or not it's their style. Like, I'm very much a high fantasy type person. I don't do a lot in, like, the soft magic system sci-fi space in my own writing, but I still had a lot of fun in that game because, like, I saw how much you were enjoying building that world, mm-hmm. and I was happy to latch onto that and run with it.
And you seem to be having fun.
I'm having so much fun.
You make so many conspiracy theories. I don't even need to come up with, like, the plot for what the BBEG is doing, because you wrote it for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I cause problems for myself on purpose. It's great.
Well, you see, it makes a really cool story for everyone else.
And my poor party.
You are the reason why I'm inviting 4 people to run your level 20 fight. Yeah, I made the mistake of taking a party from level 3 to level 20, and somehow we got into level 20. I am so excited.
We're going to be such a menace.
And yeah, as a DM, don't worry about the entire campaign. The way I got this party from level 3 to level 20 was taking it literally one session at a time. Because that's just how my brain works. I can only have one thing on my brain at a time. So that's just kind of what worked for me. I know your friend who runs your Avatar game thinks things out a bit more, but just do what's comfortable for yourself. There isn't a right way or wrong way. There's simply experimenting and figuring out what works for you, really. And just try to fall in love with the process. Try to fall in love with the process of being like, what dumb idea can I come up with for next session? Like, what fun part of, like, what's an interesting way for this to start? What are the situations of the world? How can it end? That really helps. As well as, so I still consider myself a rookie DM. This is only like my third campaign, and the other two were a lot shorter. What I noticed a lot was I started finding myself stealing a lot from a show I really love. I really love Made in the Abyss, and I started stealing a lot of concepts and settings and different things from that show and just directly putting them into my game. And then my players were like, oh, that's so genius. And I just straight up, I was like, I stole that from Made in the Abyss. I stole that from this show I really like. I just mixed up all the plot points in different places and put them there. And now that I think about it more, I feel like the most successful campaigns I've been in were the ones where the person running it was doing something that was just really in their element. Like, for example, I know, so Grimish was one of my main DMs for a really long time, and he still kind of is. And in the game that we had, which I fell in love with my character so much I got a tattoo based on her, he was running Wildmount, and I know that he really loves Critical Role. No one else in the party really knew anything about Critical Role and didn't really care about listening to it, but he really loved it, and as a result, he knew so much about that world and seemed so comfortable into that world that he didn't just take it and run it, he put his own twist on it. He made his own, like, original storylines for the villains to, like, match up with their characters and sprouted it off into a whole AU of its own, just by virtue of having so much fun there that he was just putting his own heart and soul into it. And it really showed. And I don't think it was really even too much effort on his part, because he has admitted before that he kind of came up with those sessions, like, I don't know, a day beforehand, maybe less. He's like me. He's a seat of the pants DM.
Yeah, and I'm coming from kind of the complete opposite side, where it's like, I am a neurotic planner. I've only DM'd in one-shots before, and my one-shots have been more planned than any campaign Lee has ever run, probably.
Yeah, probably.
And, like, sometimes I worry if my DMing suffers from that, because I overplan and then get blindsided by the stuff that my players do, and, like, I'm not good at improv. I know I'm not good at improv, and that's intimidating as a DM, where it's like so much of the game is improv. But also, if planning helps you like feel more secure, that makes it a little bit easier to build out and go off the rails. Like, if you have a system in mind of how things need to go, you can redirect back and course correct if you kind of have a framework to work off of. Like, I mean, again, because I'm mainly a writer, I'm going to beg, borrow, and steal from, you know, my own books and stuff. But, like, for the epic fantasy series I'm writing, my outline is nothing less than a literal conspiracy board that I taped up to my apartment wall with an entire pack of sticky notes and 3 rolls of washi tape and an Excel spreadsheet that's big enough to almost bring down my computer when I open it up, and, like, 2 or 3 planning documents besides.
And I am the absolute opposite. My brain runs on the equivalent of, like, 4 gigs of RAM.
Yeah, but, like, different DMing styles, like, it works better for different campaigns, and if you're just having fun with it and doing what works best for you, that's going to correlate into better DMing. Like, I would never force myself to just improv something off the fly, because I knew that would make my DMing better, whereas Leet knows that if she, like, tries to overplan, that's going to impact the DMing style worse than if she had tried to improv it.
Though I think there's a really happy medium that I've discovered over time, which is something that's really helped me, and I feel like could really help you as well, because you were saying that you were a bit unsure if it was maybe the wrong DMing style to be a planner where a player could kind of take you off the rails at any time. I'd say my advice to you specifically would be take that planning energy and put it less into planning the story and more into planning the world. Right. So, like, for example, when I was running that part of the game, which I just directly stole from Made in the Abyss, when you guys were doing stuff, my brain was like, okay, I'm familiar with this setting. What kind of thing would happen here? You almost get the simulator running in your own head.
Yeah, plan it like you're planning a choose-your-own-adventure. Don't plan it like you're planning a novel.
Yeah, not even like a choose-your-own-adventure. Plan it more like you're planning, like, an open-world game. Like, think of, like, Breath of the Wild or the such.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what Breath of the Wild is.
I do know what Breath of the Wild is.
Okay. Sometimes I get worried about you.
I've never played it, but I do know what it is.
You do know the concept, so it's like...
like, vaguely what it is.
So, like, the game engine has a stuff like, okay, in this area, these types of enemies might appear, or there might be these types of challenges, or there's this tribe over here that you can come and interact with. I feel like having that mindset when planning a game of just like, okay, this is a starting scenario. This is kind of a vague understanding of how the world works, and here's a possible ending that they could be going towards. That really provides a good framework for planning a game without spending too much time planning the game or accidentally planning things in a way there where if your players go off and do something that you weren't expecting, you can't really get them back on track again. You kind of have the beginning and the end, and there's just a big river in between, and they can zigzag along the river as much as they want, wherever they want. And they'll eventually get there because the stream is slowly taking them there.
Mm-hmm.
Though I'd say another advice for first-time DMs, I know a lot of first-time DMs start off by running the game Lost Mines of Phandelver, because that module specifically is built to kind of teach both players and DMs how the game works. So I know that's a really popular starting point, and it's so simple, and it has so many, and it's so tropey, that what happens is a lot of people who run it kind of already have that sense of how the world works because it's just your standard fantasy setting, and if you're getting into D&D, you probably are in some way into, like, your standard fantasy. Mm-hmm. So I think that's why Mines of Phandelver tends to work so well at getting people into the game. It's because it's something that's reliable. It's reliable, and it's built in such a way that it kind of introduces you to a lot of the mechanics one at a time.
Mm-hmm. I'm just reading the chat, and I saw the concept of, like, pocketing ideas. That's something that I do a lot, too. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the phrase killing your darlings, or, like, when you have a really fun plot point or a really fun character that just doesn't work with the story, and you have to, like, cut them out for the sake of page time. Mm-hmm. Instead of killing your darlings, I call it cryogenically freezing your darlings, because I move them over to a separate Word doc called the freezer, and then, like, save that for future reference. Like, I never delete anything. I just put it into stasis.
Yeah, exactly.
So, if your players don't find the cool plot hook that you had, just put it in the cryogenic freezer and hold on to it, because it's something that you can spring on them in a later session if you're running out of ideas.
And you start running out of ideas, and you open the freezer, and suddenly all the ice cubes start falling on your face.
Yeah, it's like bowl cooking. It's like making a giant pot of soup for 16 people when you live alone.
I've seen you do that. I have two roommates, and there's 4 of us living here, and 2 of us like cooking copious amounts of food all at once.
Yeah, so many leftovers.
There's so many
leftovers. I guess you could call it leftovers instead of cryogenically freezing your darlings, but I think the first one sounds funnier.
The first one sounds more artistic.
Or sadistic.
Or sadistic. Been having that a ton lately where I was like, I can reuse this, exactly. So it's just like you kind of get to a point where it's like, your players didn't get to this cool dungeon I planned. Okay, let me put it in the folder. Takes it out 2 sessions later. Ha! It's just got a different name now.
The funniest example of this that I've ever seen in my personal writing, I came up with this series called The Layout Chronicles in middle school. Nothing you come up with in middle school is going to be your magnum opus.
Sorry, I started laughing while drinking my spicy tea. I added pepper to my tea.
Yeah, like a maniac.
It clears out my throat.
I came up with this idea in middle school, and I'm like, what if this character, like, had her soul bound to a book, and what if this or that or the other thing, and, like, had all these really wacky ideas, and, like, as I've been outlining and drafting and scrapping and editing and re-outlining this story for the past, 8 years. Wrote, 2 other books in the meantime. I finally went back into re-outlining it this summer with that sticky note outline on the wall that I was talking about. And I'd, thrown everything off the table, that big dramatic scene in the movie you see where they, just sweep all the newspapers to the side and stuff goes clattering. I'm fresh start. I'm keeping the names and, basically nothing else. And as I was, reconnecting the sticky note board together, I was wait 1 minute. 14-year-old me was on to something. And reused all of those ideas.
Think about it.
In a slightly better, more sensical, I've spent 8 years learning writing theory since then kind of way. But, 14-year-old me was on to something. I really loved this idea, and it stuck with me for 8 years because of this.
If you really think about it, those ideas you had as a kid are just, they're so out there and whimsical and original.
Kids
because
are so
your brain
creative.
Doesn't have the filters yet. So if you go back in and you go back into your creative history of what was I trying to make when I was a kid?
What was I inspired by when I was 13?
Yeah. Because honestly, look, the stuff that you were reading when you were 11 just changed your life forever.
I think one of the best pieces of writing advice I ever read was your tastes. Your skills will never match your tastes. And so you have really good taste and you know what you like. And it will be very frustrating because your skill at executing those concepts will never live up to your taste because you have good taste. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't stop trying to reach that. Because one day the thing that you make will be the good taste that inspires somebody else.
Exactly. And now that I think about it...
And that gap is what, inspires you to be better and improve.
When it comes to art, have I ever showed you the chart of pain?
It's a helix?
Yeah. So basically what I call it is it's called the chart of pain, and the way it works essentially is that there's two curves. There's one curve called your skill, and another one there's one called skill and one your sight. So your skill is your skill, but your sight is also your ability to critique other works. It's your ability to assess the qualities of other works. So what happens is that you start off with your sight above your skill, and then your skill will begin to rise to meet the sight, and then then
they switch places.
Yeah, they switch places. You plateau for a while, and that's the time when you feel oh, I'm really good at this. But then your sight starts to increase again as you kind of develop your ability to critique and assess other works, and then once again you feel you suck, and it's just this cycle in perpetuity.
My dad had another name for this. It was kind of this, he called it the competence spiral. And he said you start, and this was when I was learning piano. I did a bunch of different hobbies as a kid because I was homeschooled and my family was you're going to try all the things. So I was learning piano and my dad was telling me about how he learned how to ride motorcycles. And you start as being unconsciously incompetent, where it's just you're having fun, you're messing around, you're doing the Miss Frizzle thing of take chances, make mistakes, get messy, and you're just having a good time because you're learning a new skill and it's super fun. And you improve crazy. Your growth is exponential because you don't know that you're still bad at it, but you're learning a lot because you're still having fun. And then you hit the block of you're consciously incompetent, where now you know you're bad at it, but you see how far you've come. And that's the place where a lot of people quit learning new skills because suddenly, it's that switch over in the curve of hell, as Gio is calling it. And you realize, all of the stuff that I'm doing really isn't actually that great, and here's this big gap between where I want to be and where I am, and I'll never catch up. And a lot of people quit. But if you keep working past that, then you'll become consciously competent, where you can do good work, but you have to think really hard about it. It's difficult to do good work, but you know you're capable of it now. And at a certain point, it just becomes second nature, and those things that you struggled with so much once before become second nature to you. And then the cycle starts all over again with the next skill. So, for me, learning art, it was, anatomy, and just, learning how to pose people. And now it's expressions, and then it's lighting, and then it's something else. That spiral never ends. It's just, one thing after another.
And at some point, it comes back to where you look at the anatomy again, and you realize you've gotten better at assessing anatomy, and now it looks like everything sucks.
Oh, yeah. It's just an endless cycle.
It's an endless...
But if you learn how to appreciate the endless cycle and be that's the creative process. That's the scientific process. That's the iterative nature of just being a person and learning how to live life, be it in learning how to DM, learning how to be a player, learning how to do any new skill, be it coding, calculus, art, writing stories, you just gotta try and keep working.
And thinking back on it, I like to think back to like those first times I did RP when I was like 14 years old, where when I was in the group chat, I was honestly giving a lot of other people a hard time because I lacked a lot of the self-awareness. But nowadays, I tend to play a lot of the characters where on paper they should be a pain in the ass to the group, but I understand other people's boundaries enough in order to play with those tropes that can sometimes be a pain in the ass, but make it work with the group. Mm-hmm. At least hopefully I do.
Yeah, I have a lot of fun playing with your characters. We just had a session tonight and it was a complete riot. I had so much fun with the foils.
Yeah, we have a little thing going on between another character and I, where basically it's my goal to murder the other character. And in a lot of games, nobody would let that plot fly, without a lot of careful planning, but
we're just vibing. It's so much fun.
We're just vibing, and here's the thing, is when you get to know your friends, and you get to know kind of what works with them, and what the vibe is, and what's okay, what isn't, and what's actually fun, then you can get away with doing some slightly dicier stuff like that. It's really... Playing good D&D is about sort of being able to... getting to know the vibe of your own group, and kind of working yourself into it in order so that, like, kind of knowing if you match the vibe, so you can also have fun, because I went off and I played an Apollo's game over at his place, and they have a completely different vibe. And there's nothing wrong with it, it's just a different vibe, and I like that one too, but I play differently over there than I do in this group, because each group is just their own dynamic.
You gotta match the energy.
Yeah, it's kind of like how stories themselves will all have different vibes and the such.
I want to play in one of Apollo's games sometimes. It seems like it would be a riot.
Oh, it's very crunchy. It's very Battlefield stuff.
Oh, fun.
So you're gonna have to get to know that.
Yeah.
He runs it a lot like a board game night, but I really appreciate it because I get the chance to be crunchy.
So whoever said that nobody should learn calculus in the chat, I will die on the hill that art and science are fundamentally the same thing. They're not two sides of the same coin. They are the same thing. We'll argue about this, but I'm an engineer. I study that sort of stuff, and so like the creative process and the scientific process really are the same thing, just applied to different parts of life.
I posted a poll on my Twitter once of if VTuber rigging is an art or a science, and I told her about it, and she just about ate me.
No, the fundamental premise of pitting one versus the other.
She started going off. Like, it got more heated than, like, our religious discussions, and we have those. we talk about deep stuff.
The premise is just, like, a lot of people get into and this is because of bad teachers. Bad math teachers make people feel like they're stupid at math and they can't do math and they suck at it. And it's like creative people can't be math people it's the STEM versus humanities thing. It doesn't exist. If you can do one, you can do the other. Like, maybe you'll have one talent at one or the other and you know what you prefer one or the other, but like it really is the same kind of like neural pathways and like learning how to think outside the box. I'm way better at calculus than I am, say, accounting, because accounting is very like straightforward, like linear thinking, and calculus is abstract, and telling stories is abstract, and you don't think those two skills have anything in common, but they really, really do.
I can't do calculus.
Well, it's like
I flunked out of it twice.
I guess my moral of the story here is like, don't sell yourself short. Is like, don't tell yourself that like you can't do something until you give it an honest try. And maybe you give it an honest try and you realize that you hate it, and that's fine.
Me and calculus.
Yeah. Maybe you give it an honest try and you realize that you hate it, and that's fine. Like, I hate coding. I give it an honest try, and I know I hate coding.
I like coding.
And you love coding.
I like coding. I like putting... My brain works like a computer. It can only handle one direction at a time.
No. If I have to handle one direction at a time, I'll cry. But, like... it's still like you give it an honest try and like you learn whether or not you like it, and like I got to the point where I realized I was consciously incompetent at something and I quit, and like I knew that if I kept working at it I could get better, but I just decided that wasn't what I was going to put my effort into.
Yeah. So
like don't sell yourself short before you even try. Like taking that first step and giving it a try is the most important thing.
So like something I realized in myself was I spent many years drawing, and a lot of the reasons I started drawing were to impress people that I knew, because in those communities, being able to draw was how you got popular. But then later on, especially really recently, I kind of reassessed my relationship with drawing and realized that's not really quite the thing that brings me so much joy. Like, I like drawing. I like the ability to, like, create my friends' characters, but I'm comfortable where I'm at. And I think I want to put more of my energy into some other creative endeavor. I really like helping people. I really like teaching things. I do a lot of tutoring. Maybe I could kind of turn that into, like, a content creation thing. I also like talking, and I'm told I can be a decent entertainer, you know? So then I kind of diverted that attention over here, and now I'm streaming. And honestly, so far, it's actually been a lot more fun, and I'm really happy to be here. So also, when it comes to stuff like playing versus DMing, if you're a player and you really love playing and you try DMing and you just decide it's not really for you, there's nothing wrong with not wanting to be the DM. And there's plenty of DMs which they start DMing and they never want to be a player again because that's just what works better for them, you know? It's really about putting yourself first and kind of thinking to yourself, what's fun for me? And reminding yourself that there's really no explicit pressure to do things the right way, you know?
Yeah, there's no one right way to do things.
What have we got here? I love DMing a lot more than playing. Yeah, and I honestly like them a lot equally personally. I like the chance to do both because with DMing, I get the chance to finally convince you to watch Made in Abyss with me, which will happen eventually once we get a little more time.
We're getting there.
We're getting there. We finally got you to watch one Ghibli movie. Ghibli?
Get the college admissions out of the way. Make your job applications out of the way.
Yeah, you'll get it. You're a little smarty pants. You'll get a job.
We watched Kiki's Delivery Service, and I was like crying on the couch by the end of it.
And that's another point because a lot of Kiki's Delivery Service, a big part of it is like a theme of
like creative
burnout, and I feel like that's something that happens to a lot of first-time DMs because they feel a lot of this pressure to be perfect, and with that pressure to be perfect comes a time where you're just like, I really don't want to do this anymore, but I feel obligated. I feel like I have to. Which is something that can get a lot of first-time DMs to stop. Like, my first full campaign I ran, I remember with you guys at some point I just said, I'm not having fun with this anymore. I'm giving you guys a final session, and I'm saying this is the end, and I'm never DMing again. That was simply because I was just running it in a way that wasn't quite vibing with me. It was nothing wrong with my players. You guys were all so amazing, and I still loved everything you did so much. I was just, on my end, I was feeling so incompetent at the time that I felt like I couldn't do the game anymore. But at the same time, when I said that and I said that I was having that trouble, you guys were really accommodating of the fact that I needed to take a pause, and now I got to run a new game for you guys, and at some point I got to bring every single player back from that old game into this one, and I think it was kind of a really good reconciliation of me figuring out, actually I do like DMing. I just needed to find my stride. I just needed to be like, I'm running a more one-shot style of things rather than a continuous story the traditional way.
Yeah. For me, I hit that burnout this past summer. Having bronchitis for 2 months certainly didn't help, but I'd been editing this one story called Runaways, and in the context of all of my stories, this is relatively smaller and simpler one. It's like a pretty standard hero's journey, girl rescues her sister from the fairies kind of deal. But it's the first thing I'm going to publish. It's going to be my debut novel, and I'm hoping to publish it after I graduate in a year. And I'm in the 3rd round of edits. I just gotten a lot of beta reader feedback. My beta readers are amazing. Beta reading is also brutal when it comes to the creative, realm of somebody's reading my work for the first time and telling me everything that's wrong with it and everything that they like about it, and now I have to live up to their expectations and make this thing perfect before I send it off to editors and before I send it off to cover artists and make this a real thing. It needs to be perfect first. And I hit burnout this summer really bad and couldn't write at all or edit at all, because it's just editing at this point. It's getting down to the nitty-gritty of sentence choice and word choice. And burnout hard. And so I just took a break and I quit and I made a pirate shirt. just taught myself how to hand sew and went at it because I needed to do something different. And now that I'm back at school, I'm getting back into it. I have had enough of a break. I've had enough of space from that story that I can go back to editing it. I'm working on other short stories. I'm branching into other genres. I re-outlined the Layout Chronicles in that time, revisiting an old story that I loved in middle school. And it's been really good for me to be able to stretch in different directions and not try to take everything so professionally.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'll go back to it eventually. I still love Runaways. I'm not going to leave it alone. I do want to publish it as my debut novel, and I'm not going to give up on that. But I needed the space and not just to jump into another realm of edits immediately after getting beta reader feedback.
Yeah. So Mario says in regards with burnout and DMing, I have a weird feedback loop of hyping myself up. I've never felt burnout DMing, and it causes me to get inspired to draw, which gets me to draw things that I want to use in the game. I tend to find games sizzle out before I do. So yeah, it is that kind of
That's a really good recommendation of, like, use other creative hobbies to hype yourself up.
Yeah.
Because I started teaching myself how to draw, and drawing scenes from Runaways got me back into editing it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because you're almost like, you have that creative muscle, right? But you've got, like, different sections in the muscle.
Yeah.
And if you're working one
it
too
out in
hard,
different ways.
if you're working one part of it too hard, it's gonna stretch out. You're gonna get, like, a mental muscle injury. But then you kind of go to the muscle group next to it, and you try something different for a little while. You try your sewing or your drawing, and then that first part, it takes time to heal, but as a result, the entire muscle is stronger, and then with the first part, you feel like you can do more with it.
Right, exactly.
At least it's how I see it. Grimish says, I feel like that's something a lot of people I know go through as DMs. We try and fail, think it's all over, and then we try something new and it clicks really well because we found what we're passionate about. Yeah. I think what a lot of people tend to be almost a victim of is essentially this thought of, like, there's a proper way to do it. Like, you start off by maybe seeing a show and you want to copy your favorite DM from a show, which, first of all, that's a great way to get inspiration when you're first starting out, or just a way to get the ropes. But a lot of people get caught up in being that show perfect perfection that they don't realize, or they just kind of lose the fact that you're just here to hang out with your friends. I even felt that way DMing my current game, and I love running that game, but there are so many times where I start talking to Lear like, hey, I don't think, like, hey, I'm feeling like I'm really sucking at running this game because these stories or these plot threads I had in mind aren't really working out, and
that's when I bring out the conspiracy thread.
that's where Lear's like, really? I've been looking at all these conspiracies you've been making, and you're such a genius. And I'm like, what?
You got, like, all these different things set up, and this is the Zodiacs and that was the other thing.
I'm like, thanks for the rest of the plot.
Yeah.
I
can't read chat from here.
So, you can't read chat from there.
Sorry.
Alright, so here's what Grimish says. Honestly, that's a big thing to me. It's passion. One of my professors said to me, I need to scroll. There's always something to teach you. There's always someone to teach you anything you want to know, but the one thing they can't teach you is passion. So once you get a feel for what gets you going, you'll eventually get it right. Exactly. If there's that drive to do it and that okayness in the fact that you're okay with not being perfect at it, then that is what's going to drive growth, and eventually you're going to make some stuff that makes you really proud of yourself. Eventually you're going to run that game that you're super proud of, that brings your friends together and possibly even gives you a new friend group. Or you'll find that passion to reach out and join other people's games and, you know, just get started and realize you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be there.
Yeah. And that passion is, like, what inspires. I've been listening to a lot of Rolling with Difficulty lately, and that's another thing about, like, D&D shows being something that get people into something, like watching other people and enjoying their joy secondhand, and then being inspired to bring that to your own friends. And so I am planning my first, like, big campaign to start this upcoming semester, and it's inspired by the Planescape setting of Rolling with Difficulty, because I just really fell in love with that idea of the multiverse. And so, you know, even though I've got all this other, like, creative stuff that I'm working on, like 10 different projects at once, like, that's been added to the top of the list because it's like I currently have that passion, that creative drive, and I'm gonna, like, ride that until it peters out and then jump to another. This is called productive procrastination. You procrastinate one project by doing all the other projects, and eventually you get it all done.
Look, it works. It's honestly, from what my understanding, from what I remember, that's actually a coping skill for ADHD. where if you're having trouble working on one thing, but you can work on something else, just work on it, and then when you get bored of it, jump to another thing. Like, for example...
This is the only way I've gotten through school.
Like, think about it. Like, let's say you have a task ahead. You have a whole task of building an entire campaign, right? Now, let's compare that to cleaning the bathroom. You've got a bunch of parts of it. You've got your characters, you've got your storyline, you've got your world building, you've got your NPCs. You just kind of take turns about on all these little bits of it and kind of mix in other stuff. Like, for example, with cleaning the bathroom, you clean the sink for a little bit. When you're bored of cleaning the sink, you're gonna mop the floor, and eventually you're gonna start cleaning the mirror outside because, you know what, I'm just gonna draw some stuff related to that setting, and it's not quite planning that setting, but it's cleaning something close to the bathroom, so when I go to the bathroom, it looks a little nicer.
Again, this is the idea of, like, you work on something for a little while, and it might not be personally related, but you cryogenically freeze your darlings and then bring them back later.
Exactly. Also, I just realized, how did I finally get this bullet back in my hands? Haha! You're caught. You're captured. Boom. Ah, damn it. The gun's been confiscated from me again. It's a Nerf gun. It's a Nerf gun. So yeah, honestly, I feel like we've covered most of the, like, let's just summarize what we've talked about tonight for when getting started in D&D. When you're getting started in D&D by yourself for the first time, don't care too much about being perfect about the rules. Just think about what kind of character you'd want to play that you just have fun with, even if it's a fantasy version of yourself. It's perfectly fine. Go ahead, try to get yourself into a game, and just get started. It's going to be a little janky at first, but think about a bunch of people in this room here today are VTubers. Think about your first stream and how many mistakes you made on a technical level with that. My first stream didn't have any sound.
Oh no.
I couldn't figure out how to get sound to turn on. So I was like, all right, guys, pick your own soundtrack. But now, I mean, yesterday, currently we're working on a janky setup where the music is coming from your phone, but yesterday I was actually able to hear the music, and I was so proud of myself.
Nice.
Both I and the chat were able to hear the music. It was great. So just get started. Don't worry about being perfect. You'll build up those different pieces of what makes you a great D&D player later. And same thing when it goes to teaching somebody. Just throw them in, give them a hand. Do realize that mechanically you'll probably be playing 2 characters at once, but if you care about your friend, which you probably do if you're inviting them to play D&D with you, and you're probably going to end up having fun, just like making conspiracies with your new friend, because new players are so creative. New players are so creative and off the walls. I'm obsessed.
It's really fun.
Yeah. It is really fun. It's extremely fun.
I have another story. Can I interrupt you?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm playing in an Avatar campaign with some of my friends from high school and then other friends from that friend group that I know secondhand. And we had a new player come in who'd never played any TTRPG before. And this Outlet thing is more of a homebrew than is real D&D. But our party currently consists of like a firebender, earthbender, waterbender, airbender, in like a post-season 3, before core of Republic City. It's mostly homebrew. But this new player came in, and he's like, I want to be the son of the cabbage merchant. And I want to have cabbage powers. And we were like, hell yeah. We can absolutely have cabbage powers. And so he's filling the sole charisma role in our party, because he's a merchant. Mm-hmm. And it's really funny to see what he comes up with, because he has no idea what's going on 90% of the time, because he came into the game late, but he's like, cabbages and turtle ducks at all times, and it's such a joy to play with him. Another one of the characters was trying to guess like what bending style my character had, and she's like, she's a bat, she's a secret earthbender, and she's actually an airbender. So just really fun to play with new people, like give them the benefit of the doubt.
So yeah, so when it comes to introducing new people to the game, a lot of them are gonna say stuff that's like batshit insane. They're just gonna be like, I'm doing this, and you're in your head, you're like, that's not in the rules. You can't do that. But just work with them. Work with them and make them feel special, because that'll make them want to come back, and eventually they'll get a grip on the rules of like, yeah, technically you're not supposed to be able to do this, but I got away with it once because it was really cool. Like, I mean, personally, what I do is I'll say, this is a really cool idea. I really like your thinking. I will let you do this once. And I'll let them have their moment, because when people feel cool, they want to play again. But that's kind of how I am as a DM. So that's with getting started as a player. What we talked about with getting started as a DM is also very similar. Just go into it and don't worry about being perfect. It's perfectly fine to essentially steal something you love from another franchise or from a show you really like or from your own writing. It's perfectly fine to go ahead and just copy, because that's something you're familiar with and that's something that you're going to feel a lot better DMing. Another tip is checking out Lost Minds of Phandelver. It's just a really good introduction adventure. And finally, it's just kind of keeping yourself in tabs of like, am I having fun and what can I do to fix this? It's always good to communicate with your party. It's always good to be on good terms. They're not your competitor. You guys are all there together to have fun, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So that's essentially my thing. And whether you're being a player or a DM, being aware of that cycle of you're not going to feel like you're good at it. You're just not. It's just not how human brains work. Human brains are built to criticize. But that's totally fine. You probably are better than you think you are. And if you really need a reality check, just admit it. Just go to your party or to your friend and be like, hey, I'm kind of anxious about how I'm doing here. Could you let me know what's going on? And hopefully your friend is going to be honest with you. So, as we wrap this up, there's two things. First of all, Lear, could you tell us about what you do over on your own socials?
Yeah, so I mentioned I'm an author. I don't have any books like formally published yet, but I'm trying to kind of build up a repertoire in the online community and just find people who are interested in reading my writing, so that way whenever I do publish something, people are there and like ready to listen to it.
Mm-hmm.
Currently I've got a couple of books in the works. I mentioned Runaways. That's my middle grade portal fantasy adventure. It follows Hannah. She's an older sister whose younger sister Cecilia goes missing one night after they read the story of the Pied Piper, and Hannah puts together 2 and 2 and realizes her sister was taken by the fairies and she's got to go rescue her. So that's currently in its 4th draft, and I'm hoping to publish that in about a year. I'm also working on an epic fantasy series called The Layout Chronicles, which I've outlined this past summer. The prequel to that series is a book called Storjai. That manuscript is finished. I'm, again, also editing that, getting it ready for publication, and first beta readers and then later publication. I plan to self-publish. But I also run a blog. I have a Tumblr blog, I've got Pinterest, I've got an Instagram, and I've got a website where I post weekly writing updates, writing advice, reading recommendations, book reviews, books to read if you want to learn how to write well and like a certain part of the writing process that book does really well, and also nonfiction book reviews for writers, and excerpts from my stories. I've also got a mailing list that does original new short stories every quarter. Every 3 months you can sign up for a new short story. And that's totally free. It's not like clickbait or anything. It's just Tumblr will eat my writing if I try to post it because the search function sucks. And then Tumblr, I just mostly mess around and do like ask games. That's the best way to like communicate with me like on a pretty regular basis. I hang out there all the time. So yeah, come find me over on all of those different socials, and I'm always happy to ramble about my characters if you want to.
Here, let me go ahead and put your socials
Yeah.
into the chat one more time because I'm on her reading list. I really like her writing. One second, I can't figure out how to write. Hi, Kathy! Thank you so much for stopping by! I need to learn how to type. There we go. Does that work? Cool. Yay, it works in all caps. Yeah, I read her stuff. She's such a great writer. She has such a great way of describing things. She's very easy to read. So if you liked what you were talking about today, she also spends a lot of time on her blog talking about the writing process. She talks about advice. She talks about her experience. She also has a blog where she was talking about making that awesome pirate shirt. So if you want to kind of be in the loop of a really cool person who does a lot of really cool things, She's just really fun to read.
Like creative info dumping.
Yeah, just
Mostly
check her out.
focused, but creative info dumping.
Yeah, exactly. So go check her out. Give her some support if you liked having her here today. And speaking of support, so I think you might have realized by now what my my little tradition of sorts is here. Let me just, oh my gosh, my face. Oh no, my face. What's going on with my face? One moment, I'm doing a thing. I promise this will work. Sorry, I look strange. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and, this is looking so weird. I'm gonna zoom in real quick. I wanna get real close and personal as I do, you know? Hi. Okay, we'll give you a little bit of space back there, Lear. Well, I guess it's about time that we do our little classic. First of all of you guys, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate having you here. I just realized half of my face is off the screen. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to cover you.
Oh, Jet.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming. We love that. We love to have you here. And it was great to hang out with you guys. We had such a great discussion. We learned a lot of wonderful things. And I think it might be a good time to find someone to raid, isn't it? Let's go find someone to raid. Alright, who are we raiding today? Alright, we've got Grammy, who's playing golf. There's 2 golfs and 1 Cult of the Lamb. You know what? Out of these 3 names, who do you want to go raid?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, who do you want to raid?
Oh, I only know Arsenal.
You only know Arsenal. You know what? Let's once again raid Arsenal because I raid him every single time.
Oh no. Well, commit to the bit.
Commit to the bit. All right, let's go raid my.
I hope to get to know everybody else soon, but I only know.
Let's go raid my worst enemy, Arsenal. Let's go raid him with love. All right, let's get this going. What's
a raid? I don't know how Twitch works.
Basically, when I end the stream, I can send everyone somewhere else.
Oh,
and
that's
just
funny.
be like, all right, let's raid. Bye-bye.
Bye.